Welcome back. So there are concerns over the rise of bullying incidents in the country's schools. Now, in the latest incident that sent shockwaves across the country, a grade 8 pupil in Delft in the Western Cape was subjected to a traumatic and brutal act of bullying. The young boy was reportedly shoved face first into a toilet bowl filled with feces. Well, we are going to get some analysis on really what needs to be done about the situation. We're joined by Dr Keitumetse Mashego, a clinical psychologist. Dr. Mashego, a good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, I'm trying to imagine how a young person comes back from such a traumatic experience, but looking at this case coming out of Delft, just your initial thoughts when you first heard about it.
You know, it's sad that what's happening in the schools is truly a reflection of where we are as society, where we are, in South Africa, because, bullying is a systemic problem. No one is born a bully. No one is born angry, meaning that the people who are bullies have, the behavior was role modeled to them, either by parents, by caregivers, by people around them, or just by society, because we are so desensitized to violent crimes. There's so much GBV, so much abuse out there that we are really a desensitized nation. But, the victim of such, it's quite sad because they really need the psychological support to overcome. And, with victims of bullying, usually they become at risk, for suicidal attempts or suicidal ideation, which really, shows the seriousness of the impact of someone who is bullied.
Yeah, I'm even thinking, and of course, you don't want to think too much about the feelings of the of the perpetrator over the victim, but there's something to be said around a child who thinks about putting another child's face in feces. What feeds that? And, do we have the resources necessary, certainly in our communities and in our homes, to deal with that?
Sadly, children who display such behaviors, they usually are functioning from a place of pain. And of course, this is not to excuse, their behavior. There is no excuse for what bullies do. It's just to understand that, in their minds, they're projecting whatever it is they're projecting onto their targets. And this implies that, they've got their own traumas that they are dealing with. And hence we go back to who is raising the bullies. They are likely being bullied at home or bullied, or something is happening that they are projecting on the innocent victims. And we really need to understand that bullies tend to not get over, the pain, and therefore tend to develop personality disorders, such as your antisocial personalities. This is where we get people who, commit crimes with no remorse. So you can understand that bullies are likely to, develop severe pathology whereby the prognosis is quite poor. Now, you can imagine how they will function as adults if this is how they are as children. So it's really quite a sad state to see that in our society, there are so many children who are bullies. So there's really a crisis at hand. And sadly, as I've indicated, the prognosis is often poor for intervention because they go back to the systems where the bullying is promoted or it's role modeled by whoever it is that's raising them.
Yeah. What do we do about the fact that not all schools have access to a psychologist on the facility? I mean, if you go into some of our plush schools, you might very well find one. But not in all schools. Is there a place where, these students are able to go and purge?
Yeah. And it's quite sad because I'm of view that actually all schools should have, no matter the area or, the social standing of that school. But of course, the reality says something else. But really, I think that we really need to promote the services that are available out there. But I think the important thing is to also have policies in the schools that actually do not tolerate bullying. Yeah. Because you hear a lot of cases whereby nothing is done about the bully when reported. So we really need to have a discussion, the teachers, parents, school governing bodies to really take seriously bullying because it can really have repercussions for the victims. So I think as society, we really need to start speaking seriously about it and not tolerating it and ensuring that, we nip it in the bud, at the source. But really, it's unfortunate that not everyone has access to social services that we need, but to support the victims of such, but also to identify when you do get students who have bullying tendencies, because I think that's also important to, identify them before they actually do this, and to actually have safe spaces where students, scholars can speak out when they see that there is a bully, where, some sort of anonymous reporting. But of course, it means that the school system must be fair and do the right thing when someone is reported as a bully.
Yeah. There's the allegation that this was a racially motivated attack. This child may very well have to go back into that schooling environment on a daily basis with the reminder that everybody knows what happened to them. I imagine that for parents, there's such a helplessness, right? What is the support that you give to this child now?
Definitely, there is a need to, debrief the child, but to also, deal with whatever deep emotion. It could be shame, anger, whatever the victim is really struggling with. A lot of, some sort of flashbacks, because I assume that he was fighting or she was fighting, the police as they were doing this. So we really need to, there should be crisis intervention for this child who was a victim to such, but to also now to ensure that it's ongoing, even, as they reintegrate into the school. But really there should be a stance from the school against the police as well, to show that it's not tolerated. And, if it's stemming from racism, really, that is a reflection of how wounded we are as society. Now, the people who are wounded are now the teachers, the parents, and now this is castrating into, the children, the future generations, because, we're not dealing with the root cause of, such aggressive behavior, which is quite sad. And it will carry on until we start actually wanting to change, the source of the root cause of the bullying behavior. Now, the difficulty with psychological problems is that one must see that there is a problem for them to benefit from the problem. So meaning that if the child, the bully, the bullying children out there are coming from families where bullying is promoted, whether it's racially motivated or just an aggressive bullying parents or caregivers that this child is exposed to, that if they don't see a problem, that the problem will continue. And that's where, it becomes quite tricky for psychological problems to be dealt with, because one must see that they have a problem for them to benefit from it. And, people like that, usually the prognosis is poor because they see nothing wrong with their behaviors.
Yeah. Just lastly, there's, of course, the power that I talked about with parents, what it is that we can do. And for this young man, this is for this 14-year-old little boy, and I don't want to say young man because a 14-year-old is still a child. And is traumatized, but for some, it may be even difficult for them to come forward and talk to their parents. The signs that parents should be looking out for to see that their children are coping. What is it that we should be watching for?
I think it's just the difference in how they behave. Maybe the child was outgoing, now they're a bit more withdrawn. Their sleeping patterns, maybe they're not sleeping well, and it could be that they're sleeping too much or sleeping too little, or they're just restless. And maybe just how they dress, right? Because some of the children develop, cutting behaviors, or they lose weight, or they just change, because they're so uncomfortable in their own skin that, they just always continue, for example, wearing jerseys, even in, when it's hot. So just that odd behaviors, and or they're just outgoing. Maybe they were quite reserved, but now they are the life of the party. They just cannot sit still. It's almost like they're acting out of character. And also just the things that they say, I think parents should be on the lookout. If a child is just so pessimistic suddenly, or just, talking negatively, or they've got these cognitive distortions just about life and about people and about school and about, just going forward in their life. So it's really that. And also maybe failing in school.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not performing as they used to before. So that's some of the tell signs. But also their appetite may change, whereby they're eating too much or they're eating too little. There's weight gain, weight loss, and also just that irritable bowel syndrome sort of symptoms, whereby someone has diarrhea, ulcer-like pains, and also just constipation. So physically they can become ill, because when there's a lot of stress, there can be somatic symptoms that can play out that were not there before. And of course the mood, and maybe more anxious, they're more restless, and just their child not being who they were before.
Yeah, it's such a reminder for us all to be, really attentive with what's going on with our children. Dr. Keitumetse Mashego, thank you so much for speaking to us, and hopefully you know, the parents watching this, you know, obviously feeling empowered from that discussion. Dr. Keitumetse Mashego is a clinical psychologist, is speaking to us there.